Ford built some of the most famous movie cars in history: the Bullitt Mustang, the Bond car, a horror movie truck. All three vanished for decades. Nobody knew where they went. But here's the twist. Almost none of them actually stayed gone. One turned up in a family's driveway in Mexico, 10 miles from where everyone thought it was destroyed. 10 legendary Fords. 10 disappearances. Let's track them all down. Number 10. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1977, Ford F-150. Before the movie stars and the spy chases, we start with the truck that hauled around one of the most disturbing villains ever put on film. The 1977 Ford F-150, used throughout the Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequels, was a working truck, rusted and beat up on purpose because the filmmakers wanted every prop to look like it belonged on a rural Texas farm where something was very wrong. After filming, it didn't go to some Hollywood vault. It went back into the world the same way most low-budget horror props did: sold off cheap, forgotten, because nobody in 1977 thought a chainsaw movie would still matter 50 years later. For decades, horror collectors chased rumors. Most led nowhere. Then, in the early 2000s, a memorabilia hunter found a truck matching the production specs behind a repair shop outside Round Rock, Texas, still wearing factory paint under years of grime. Frame modifications for camera rigs matched production photos, and a welded bed reinforcement matched the original equipment logs. It sold at a horror convention auction for a shocking price, and the new owner kept it deliberately unrestored, because cleaning it up would erase the exact thing that made it terrifying in the first place. Number 9. The Family Truckster, 1979, Ford LTD Country Squire. From horror to comedy. When National Lampoon's Vacation went into production, the filmmakers needed a car so aggressively uncool it would be funny just sitting still. So a 1979 Ford LTD Country Squire wagon became the Wagon Queen family truckster, overchromed, wood-paneled, painted a color that doesn't exist in nature. Several were built for filming, and most were destroyed or scrapped afterward, because nobody in 1983 was thinking about preserving a joke car from a comedy sequel. For years, the surviving hero truckster was a mystery, rumored to be sitting misfiled in a studio backlot storage yard. A prop collector finally tracked it there in the late 1990s. Its custom trim cracked but structurally intact underneath. Restoring a car that was never supposed to look good is a strange challenge. The restorer had to recreate the trim pieces from the original shop sketches, since nothing about the truckster came from a factory parts catalog. When it debuted at a comedy film festival, fans lined up just to sit in the driver's seat and pretend to be Clark Griswold for a minute. Number 8. Diamonds Are Forever, 1969 Ford Mustang. Straight to Bond. In 1971's Diamonds Are Forever, Sean Connery's Mustang performs one of the franchise's most famous stunts, squeezing through a Las Vegas alley on 2 wheels, a shot so tight the crew shaved down the alley walls to make it work. Ford supplied several Mustangs for the production, and after filming, they scattered the way most studio cars did, sold off through dealer auctions with almost no documentation, because nobody at United Artists in 1971 was thinking about future collectors. For decades, Bond hunters chased leads with nothing solid. Then a British collector specializing in Bond vehicles tracked a matching Mustang to a private garage outside Nevada, sold years earlier as a plain used car with zero mention of its film history, confirming it came down to a front suspension reinforcement stunt teams commonly used, matched against a frame stamp from the exact UK import window. The restored Mustang now appears at Bond conventions, where fans reenact the 2-wheel stunt with a lot more caution and a lot less speed. Number 7. The Mad Max Interceptor, 1973 Ford Falcon XBGT. This next one isn't even technically an American Ford, but it's built on American muscle car DNA, and its story is one of the wildest in this entire list. When Mad Max went into production in Australia in 1979, The filmmakers needed a car that looked like pure menace on wheels for the film's villain. And later, for Max himself, they took a 1973 Ford Falcon XB GT Coupe, a car Ford Australia built using the same muscle car formula as its American cousins, and transformed it into the Pursuit Special, a black supercharger-topped monster that looked like it had driven straight out of a post-apocalyptic nightmare, because that was exactly the point. Only one true hero interceptor was built for the original film, alongside a couple of backup vehicles for stunts, and after filming wrapped, the car did what most low-budget Australian film props did in 1979. It got sold and sold again, passing through a string of private owners who had no real understanding of what they owned. For years, it toured minor car shows around Australia, its custom bodywork slowly deteriorating, its supercharger non-functional, painted over more than once by owners who just wanted a cool-looking coupe. It came shockingly close to being scrapped entirely in the 1980s before a Mad Max superfan intervened and bought it specifically to save it from the crusher. That fan spent years and a serious amount of money returning the Interceptor to its exact screen appearance, tracking down the correct supercharger unit and rebuilding the custom front nose cone from scratch using still frame photos as a blueprint. The restored car has since toured North America, appearing at film festivals where fans who grew up on Mad Max stood in line for hours just to see it in person. It's a reminder that sometimes the most legendary movie car isn't the one with the biggest budget behind it. It's the one that survived against every possible odd. Quick side note, most car problems come from small things people overlook. I put together a simple longevity guide based on everything I've learned, and it walks you through exactly what to watch for. It's linked in the description below. Number 6. Thelma and Louise, 1966, Ford Thunderbird. Few movie cars carry as much emotional weight as the green 1966 Ford Thunderbird convertible from Thelma and Louise. It's not a muscle car built for chase scenes. It's a symbol of freedom, carrying two women on a road trip that becomes one of the most talked about endings in film history. Ford supplied multiple Thunderbirds for the 1991 production, since a movie with this much driving inevitably burns through more than one car, and the production needed backups for both close-up filming and the more demanding desert stunt work. After the film wrapped, most of the Thunderbirds went the way most studio cars did at the time, sold through auction houses with paperwork that barely mentioned their film history, because in 1991, nobody at the studio was thinking about future collector demand for a movie about a road trip gone wrong. One of the hero cars used for close-up dialogue scenes disappeared into private hands and stayed missing for almost 2 decades until a Thelma and Louise fan doing genealogical-style research through old California DMV auction records in the early 2010s found a Thunderbird registered under a name that matched a production assistant from the film. That assistant had bought the car cheap, right after filming, driven it for years, and eventually sold it without ever fully realizing what it had been used for. Authentication came down to matching a unique interior modification the production had installed to hide camera equipment for interior driving shots, along with a paint code that matched the specific green used across the film's promotional stills, rather than any standard Thunderbird factory color. The restored Thunderbird has since appeared at classic car shows aimed at celebrating women in film. And there's something quietly powerful about watching people stand next to that particular green convertible. It's not just a car. For a lot of viewers, it's the last image of two characters who chose freedom on their own terms. Frozen forever, mid-flight. Number 5. Starsky and Hutch, 1974, Ford Gran Torino. You already know the red and white Gran Torino from television, but Ford's Gran Torino also became a movie legend in its own right when the 2004 feature film brought the character back for a whole new generation, and Ford built a fresh fleet of Gran Torinos specifically for that production to recreate the exact striping and paint scheme that made the original so iconic decades earlier. What most fans don't realize is that one of those movie-specific hero cars, built new for filming rather than pulled from a television archive, went missing almost immediately after production wrapped, sold off through a studio equipment liquidation sale with barely a mention of its film role in the paperwork. For years, that particular car became something of an urban legend among Gran Torino collectors, since most people assumed every surviving striped Torino out there had to be a TV-era survivor, when in fact, this one had an entirely separate movie production history that nobody was tracking. A collector specializing in 2000s movie vehicles finally identified it in a Midwest classic car dealership in the late 2000s, sitting on the lot as an unremarkable replica priced far below what an authenticated movie car would actually be worth, matching the frame numbers to the film's specific vehicle acquisition list, and finding a unique roll cage bracing pattern used only on the movie's stunt fleet confirmed what the dealer had no idea he was actually selling. The buyer picked it up for a fraction of its true value and has since restored it to exact big screen condition, right down to the specific stripe width used in the film's opening chase sequence. It now tours alongside other movie muscle car exhibits, standing as a reminder that even famous designs can hide an entirely separate, forgotten chapter of their own history. One that almost nobody thought to go looking for, because everyone assumed the story had already been fully told. Number 4. The original Eleanor, 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback. Now we're getting into the heavy hitters, and this next car might have one of the most debated fates in movie history. When the original Gone in 60 Seconds hit theaters in 1974, its star wasn't really an actor. It was Eleanor, a 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback dressed up to resemble a later model year for the film. Eleanor's entire purpose was one of the most dangerous stunts ever filmed at the time, a massive jump over a crashed car during the film's climactic chase, performed by stunt driver and filmmaker H.B. Halicki himself, who nearly broke his back landing it. For decades, the popular belief among fans was that the jump car was completely destroyed on impact, and the story ended there. But car history rarely ends that cleanly. In the early 2000s, a memorabilia investigator specializing in 70s stunt vehicles began cross-referencing salvage yard records from the exact California location where filming took place, and found documentation suggesting the jump car had actually been recovered and quietly repaired after filming rather than scrapped, then resold through a small independent dealer with zero mention of its Hollywood past. That lead eventually pointed to a barn outside Bakersfield, where a heavily modified 1967 Fastback had been sitting under a tarp for over 20 years, its frame bearing unmistakable stress fractures consistent with a hard, high-speed landing. Matching the reinforced frame, welds to Halicki's known stunt team modifications, along with a chassis number that lined up with the production's original vehicle acquisition records, turned what had been pure legend into a confirmed find. The restoration was painstaking since the car had absorbed real structural damage from that jump decades earlier, but the finished result now tours car shows dedicated to Halicki's legacy. Fans who grew up watching that jump on grainy VHS tapes finally got to stand next to the actual car that made it happen, and for a lot of them, it was like meeting a piece of movie history they were always told didn't survive. Number 3. Goldfinger, 1965 Ford Mustang. Back to Bond, because no movie car list is complete without at least 2 appearances from the world's most famous spy franchise. In 1964's Goldfinger, a white 1965 Ford Mustang convertible appears in the film's iconic Swiss mountain chase sequence, driven by the character Tilly Masterson as she pursues Bond's Aston Martin through winding alpine roads. It's a small role in the grand scheme of the film, but the Mustang's appearance was massive for Ford, since Goldfinger hit theaters just months after the Mustang itself debuted, making this one of the very first major film appearances for what would become America's most famous pony car. Ford loaned the production several Mustangs for filming, understanding exactly what kind of exposure a Bond film could provide for a brand new model. After production wrapped, most of those loaner cars were simply returned to Ford's promotional fleet and eventually sold off as used vehicles with no special documentation, because in 1964, nobody at Ford or the studio thought a car used for a few minutes of mountain road footage would matter 50 years later. One of those exact Mustangs disappeared into private ownership for decades until a Bond memorabilia collector in the early 2000s began systematically working through Ford's original 1964 promotional loan records, eventually tracing one surviving convertible to a small collection in the Pacific Northwest. The owner had no idea about the car's film connection at all, having bought it years earlier purely as a clean example of an early Mustang convertible. Authentication came through, matching the original loan paperwork to the car's build sheet and identifying a unique dealer-installed trim option that appeared only on the small batch of Mustangs Ford sent to the production. The car now appears at both Bond conventions and early Mustang gatherings, a rare piece of automotive history that connects the birth of an American icon to the birth of the modern action movie chase scene. Number 2. The remake, Eleanor, 1973 Ford Mustang Mach-1. When Gone in 60 Seconds got its big-budget remake in 2000, Eleanor got a dramatic redesign, transformed into a heavily customized 1973 Ford Mustang Mach-1 with a wide-body kit and that unmistakable gunmetal gray paint that turned an already legendary name into a full-blown pop culture phenomenon. Multiple Eleanor cars were built for the production, some for driving stunts, some purely for close-up shots. And unlike a lot of older movie cars, this one has an unusually well-documented paper trail, since the production understood almost immediately that these cars were going to become valuable. Still, not every Eleanor from that fleet stayed accounted for. One of the driving stunt cars, used specifically for a demanding sequence involving high-speed cornering, went missing from studio inventory records sometime after production wrapped, allegedly sold quietly to cover unexpected production costs, with the sale deliberately left off official documentation to avoid studio licensing complications. For years, Eleanor collectors debated whether this particular car even still existed, since so many aftermarket builders had created their own unofficial Eleanor replicas that flooded the market with convincing fakes. A dedicated Eleanor authenticator finally tracked a strong candidate to a private collection in Texas in the 2000s, and confirmed it using an internal stunt reinforcement to the rear subframe that matched a technical modification described in the production's own vehicle build sheets, something no aftermarket replica builder would have any reason to replicate. Once verified, the car sold for a price that stunned even seasoned muscle car collectors, cementing Eleanor's status as maybe the single most valuable modern movie car fleet ever built. It's proof that sometimes a fictional car can become more famous and more valuable than almost any real muscle car Detroit ever produced. Number 1. Bullitt, 1968 Ford Mustang GT. And now the finale, because there is no bigger story in movie car history than this one. In 1968, Steve McQueen starred in Bullitt, and its 10-minute San Francisco car chase became the gold standard against which every movie chase scene since has been measured. Two 1968 Ford Mustang GT fastbacks were built for the film, one heavily reinforced for the demanding jump stunts, and one used primarily for close-up shots of McQueen himself behind the wheel. After filming wrapped, the stunt car was so beaten up from the chase sequence that it was eventually sold for scrap, and its fate has never been in question. But the other car, the one McQueen actually drove, simply vanished from public record for nearly 50 years. McQueen reportedly tried to buy that Mustang back from Warner Brothers years after filming, but the studio had already sold it. It passed through a couple of private owners before disappearing entirely sometime in the 1970s, and for decades it became the single most sought-after missing car in Hollywood history, with false sightings and fake replicas popping up constantly, teasing collectors who had spent entire careers trying to track down the real thing. Then in 2017, the actual car was found, not in some dusty warehouse, but sitting quietly in a family's garage in Mexico, owned by a man who had bought it decades earlier as a regular used Mustang, with no idea whatsoever that his everyday car was the most famous missing vehicle in movie history. His son had grown up riding in that Mustang to school, completely unaware of what it was, until the family finally connected the dots and reached out to Ford directly. Ford confirmed the car's identity through its original engine number and unique chassis modifications made specifically for the film's stunt work. And the reveal at the 2018 Detroit Auto Show became one of the most emotional moments in modern car culture, with grown men in the crowd visibly holding back tears as the actual Bullitt Mustang rolled onto the stage for the first time in half a century. It remains unrestored to this day, kept exactly as it was found, because some cars don't need a fresh coat of paint to be perfect. They just need the truth to finally catch up to them. 10 Ford movie cars. 10 stories that prove the search is sometimes just as incredible as the film itself. From a barn outside Bakersfield to a family garage in Mexico, these cars survived against every possible odd, and every single one that's still out there is a genuine piece of American film history. If you enjoyed this one, make sure you're subscribed and that notification bell is turned on, because we've got a whole lot more of these lost and found stories coming your way. Drop a comment and let me know which one of these 10 hit you the hardest. I read every single one, and I love hearing which cars mean the most to you. If you want more legendary movie and TV vehicle stories, go check out the video on your screen right now, because trust me, it's just as wild as this one. Thanks for riding along with me today. I'll see you in the next one.